I was not expecting that I would have fun playing as Tweyen since my usual playstyle revolves around my katanas and swords. Tweyen is indeed one of the latest characters in Granblue Fantasy Relink, an agile range damager capable of raining down damage and devastating volleys to her target. I'm the Samurai and I will be covering Tweyen's playstyle in great detail, how to use her, what skills to utilize, the latest builds for her, damage test, and more. So ultimately, you will be mastering her as well and even have more fun with this awesome character. I will be breaking down the key features of her playstyle so that you can understand her gameplay flow pretty easily. For starters, the majority of Tweyen's damage come from her ultrasight arrow volley, known as the multi-lock hail, and also from her normal attacks. She is also equipped with high damaging skills that can easily be used at almost at any point in combat. So beginners will surely love this character if her playstyle matches theirs. As another ranged DPS, she can have constant uptime while retaining great mobility in combat. So with that out of the way, moving on to her special passives. The first one on the list is the Dark Huntress. Dark Huntress allows Tweyen to take advantage of her ultrasight gauge as mentioned and gives her the ability to release a powerful multi-lock hail that can hit multiple targets as the name implies, but also can be concentrated on bosses. Note that the multi-lock hail is Tweyen's bread and butter in terms of dealing damage in the course of combat. So your main focus while playing Tweyen is filling her ultrasight gauge as fast as you can and constantly releasing her multi-lock hail attacks. Notice that her gauge level increases after performing specific actions and the maximum level is 10 or the Roman numeral X. The ultrasight gauge level can be increased by completing normal combo sequences, hitting enemies with skills, dealing with combo finishers, or when landing link attacks. So to put it simply, the higher the ultrasight gauge you have, the more arrows Tweyen will release when you use her multi-lock hail. So that goes for the first passive, and the second one is the Bringer of Thunder, which carries a lot of value in most cases. What happens is all of her succeeding damaging skills will inflict paralysis and also deal more damage. Now that the gameplay basics are out of the way, let's move on to her suggested rotations. Tweyen has 3 combo sequences in her repertoire, and the first one on the list is her high mobility combo string. This can be done by pressing X, Y, and also another Y. If performed correctly, Tweyen will gracefully dash or hover quickly depending on what direction you lead her to, while also dishing out arrows. This combo is useful when you want to position her somewhere in the arena while retaining your DPS or you want to avoid certain mechanics. It is also worth mentioning that in most cases, Tweyen's attacks can be charged. In my opinion, it is worth doing so as it grants your attacks more damage by a ton and can also add a random status effect which I will be discussing later on. However, charging attacks can be a hard thing to adjust to, especially in the heat of battle. It all boils down to how much time you spend using Tweyen, and you will surely get a hang of it after practicing it for hours. But if you're like me, I would prefer performing a constant barrage of arrows that will keep me in this constant flow, so I prefer not charging my attacks. Although I am losing a lot of DPS, I prioritize my preference on this one. So basically what I'm saying is, I only do charge my attacks if I am ready to release my fully charged multi-lock hail. So for this rotation, if you prefer charging your attacks, I usually charge the first X bot input and the same thing applies to the upcoming Y. Lead Tweyen in the desired direction and then press Y to move the left analog stick again to finish the rotation. Or as mentioned previously, do not charge your attacks at all. Note that you can also hold or charge the last Y input here just in case your ultrasight gauge is maxed so you can release a multi-lock hail. The shotgun rotation, on the other hand, is only suggested when close to an enemy, so the target will suffer most of the scattered arrows that Tweyen releases. I see this rotation on the other hand for niche uses only, and in my opinion, you will not be using it at all in most cases, but rather concentrate on her bread and butter rotation, which is the next one. The last one on the list, or the last rotation on the list, is her killer rotation. Players are suggested to perform this combo most of the time. Not only this combo deals great amount of damage to targets, but also has the highest ultrasight gain compared to the other combo strings. To perform this combo, press X 3 times, follow up with 2 Ys. You will be gaining the Ultra Sight fast when doing this combo, and I've mentioned that this would be your bread and butter as well, so master this as early as possible. Optimally, you can charge all the bot inputs when doing this combo, except the last Y button, so Tweyen will perform a combo finisher. Only charge the last Y bot input here if your Ultra Sight gauge is max, so you will do a multi-lock hail as a finisher. Personally, what I do in this rotation, since I don't want to charge my attacks, is I will perform the first 3 X attacks normally and charge the next Y button, then finish it with a regular Y button again. If I do have a max Ultra Sight gauge on the other hand, I will charge the last Y button input to do a multi-lock hail instead rather than a regular combo finisher. Now that the basics of Tweyen's gameplay and rotation are out of the way, it's time for more tips that will further enhance your gameplay. So the first tip on the list is use your Ultra Sight gauge optimally. Before releasing a multi-lock hail, ensure that the Ultra Sight gauge is at max so you can take advantage of its maximum DPS. However, if you notice that a boss will undergo a mechanic or enter bloodthirst mode, it is advisable to spend your Ultra Sight regardless of its level to not miss the opportunity to even deal more damage, or else you will be wasting the said charges. The second tip on the list is to optimize your link time burst. When under link time, avoid using skills but instead spam multi-lock hail to deal the best damage possible, since during link times, her Ultra Sight gauge will always be at max. The third tip on the list is optimize your Bringer of Thunder skills. After using an SBA, it will give you the ability to inflict paralysis when using skills afterwards. It can be useful in a lot of situations, especially when Tweyen is paired with another characters that can deal with paralysis as well, like Eugen and Zeta, or even Lancelot's Glacial skill or other CCs. The last tip that I have here is, of course, not to forget to charge your attacks. Charging attacks, as mentioned, gives an additional crap ton of damage, but it is easy to forget when in the heat of battle. Take the time to practice it and it will be as smooth as butter in the long run. Well, for those players who prefer not to charge their attacks like me, can just focus on the Ultra Sight gauge and try to incorporate a max multi-lock hail if it's ready in your normal combo strings, especially when performing the killer rotation. But before anything else, only 3% of you who watches the channel regularly are subscribed, so help the channel by subscribing today, and it's free anyway. If you can hit that like button as well, it will surely help me a lot. Join our Discord server as we are building an empire where you can find like-minded people who love the genre. Now back into the video. Now that the gameplay tips are out of the way, let's move on to Tweyen's recommended skills. For the sake of the video, I'll be providing the best and essential ones for you to be able to deal the best damage possible. The first skill on the list is Peerless Eye. Peerless Eye is a mandatory skill for Tweyen as it provides the Deadshot buff, which increases Ultra Sight gauge gains after doing all the aforementioned moves. So the faster you fill the gauge, the more max multi-hail lock Tweyen can pull off. Also, it does provide Stout Heart when using this skill, and it is a good bonus. Moving on to the second skill, which is Depravity, a devastating arrow volley that is so satisfying to use and can also hit tons of damage, especially when hitting large bosses. Not only it deals a lot of damage, but it also inflicts attack and defense down, burn, poison, and also slow in the process. Additionally, this skill can increase the level of Ultra Sight significantly, making it one of the best skills for Tweyen. The third suggested skill is Clincher. What it does is it targets the enemy and shoots a devastating arrow that can deal tons of damage. Another skill that is so satisfying to use, and it gets even stronger depending on how many status effects that a target is suffering from. So try your best to use this skill after performing Depravity. Down to the last skill, which is Lethal Rain. Lethal Rain is another easy to use skill where Tweyen will release an arrow volley from above and deal a high amount of stun and good damage. You can hold this skill to manually target the area where you want to release the arrows, but I suggest just quickly using it and the system will conveniently target the enemy for you. Now I do want to mention that 2 Crown Strife is a very powerful skill, but the caveat is that it will be on cooldown when the battle starts and you can only use it once in the entirety of battle. 95% of the time the enemy is already dead before you can use it, so it only applies to longer fights like Lucilius. It prolongs the duration of any status effects inflicted on targets by a mile. However, I just really wish you could use it right away rather than waiting for an eternity. Moving on to her opener. Let's do a quick rundown for what I usually do when the battle starts. Cast Peerless Eye to have a Deadshot buff, cast Depravity to inflict status ailments, and max out Ultra Sight in the process, release a multi-lock hail, follow up with a Clincher, and lastly, Lethal Rain. From here on out, I will constantly monitor Ultra Sight and release a multi-lock hail as often as I can while using her skills in between until the battle ends. Now the skills are out of the way, let's move on to Tweyen's build. Starting with her suggested weapon first. Tweyen and Xeophon only have 2 weapons, so you will be using Bow of Dismissal first, and then when you unlock her Ascension weapon, which is Desolation Crown Bow, you will need to max this weapon and fully awaken it, as this is the best weapon for her. The Desolation Crown Bow 2 Feuds provides a level 25 attack trait, which increases attack stats by 160 points, I know that's not a lot, and a level 15 supplementary damage trait. Now that's a trait. Also adds a level 5 damage cap in Sigil Booster trait, which increases all of your traits by 1, just like in Terminus weapons. The best slot weapon for Tweyen at the moment is the mentioned Desolation Crown Bow, since Xeophon and Tweyen doesn't have Terminus weapons. For the Desolation Crown Bow's Right Stone, on the other hand, it is advisable to use a Dread Right Stone with a level 10 stun power trait. So you might be wondering, why not Vitality Right Stone for an additional crit rate like the others, right? In the case of Tweyen, you will only need 16 to 20% of additional critical hit chance from Overmastery, and you can call it a day by having 96 to 100% already if you equip a critical hit chance sigils later on. For the second and third traits, on the other hand, it's hard to recommend an exact traits due to RNG reasons, but if you can slot in DPS oriented traits like Combo Booster or Life on the Line, the better, or slot in defensive traits like Uplift and the like. So far, this is the best one that I have, so I need to work on it later on. Moving on to masteries next, and of course, pretty much by now, a 100% max mastery progress is a must. What I want to focus on is what over mastery should be prioritizing. The general rule of thumb is to focus on the following bonuses, and this applies to almost every character. It is recommended to aim for critical hit rate up 20% to reach 100% critical chance if you follow all the recommended setup in this guide, and normal attack damage cap up 20%, and skill damage cap up by 20% as well. So these are the best ones that I have, so I may need to work on this later on, especially that dreaded 8% normal attack cap. Suggested weapons are out of the way, let's discuss my recommended sigils and trait setups. I'll be providing 2 sets of loadouts depending on how good you are in the game, and note that these setups are not the best out there, I'm just simply working with what I have. Starting with my offensive setup first, and this setup is recommended for experienced players since it lacks a lot of defensive utility. If you are looking for a general setup, I have one prepared for you after this one. The first trait on the list is Tweyen's unique trait, True Crown Boundary, which provides like a level 25 catastrophe trait which increases the attack stats by 50% and damage cap by 100% when HP is below 45k, but in her case, she will cap her HP at 45. Also with level 15 regen, not a big deal and good as a bonus. The second trait on the list is another exclusive trait, which is the Dark Huntress's Warpath. What it provides is to lessen the charge time by 20%, increase its damage by 20%, and also increases stun power by 30%. I highly suggest equipping this trait, especially if you want to optimize Tweyen by charging her attacks, as you can inflict random status effects as well in the process, which can be an additional bonus. The next trait on the list is Tweyen's Awakening trait. The Huntress's Volley can give this build an overall 10% damage increase, an additional 30% chance to trigger supplementary damage every time you pull off a multi-hail lock, and both of these buffs last for 30 seconds. I highly suggest slotting this to Tweyen since you will be spamming a lot of multi-lock hail anyways. Now moving on to the next one, which is the Dark Huntress's Surge, and it increases Tweyen's rate of fire by 10% and movement speed by 15%. Although I find the Dark Huntress's Surge a waste of slot, it is kinda hard to get a Dark Huntress's Volley sigil with a good offensive or a general good trait, so I still opted for her Surge. However, if you can find Dark Huntress's Volley with a good secondary trait like Combo Booster or anything useful, you can replace Surge any time of the day. The next trait on the list is a level 30 alpha trait which adds 40% damage cap on normal attacks and adds 3% SBA to her allies whenever you activate yours. The majority of Tweyen's damage comes from her normal attacks, so equipping alpha sigils is the best choice. Next is a level 30 gamma trait which provides a general 30% damage cap boost to this build along with a shield that activates and nullifies up to 50k damage after activating your SBA. The shield for the most part is rather a bonus and a nice to have since this build lacks defensive utilities and it saves me occasionally when making mistakes in combat. The next sigil on the list is Damage Cap, and by now we all know how Damage Cap works and how it is essential in terms of dealing damage overall. Next up is the mandatory supplementary damage sigils or traits. Since her weapon provides a free level 15 supplementary damage trait, having at least 2 supplementary damage sigils will let you reach the level 45 cap. It is a must to take advantage of its immense additional damage. Now you can settle on just equipping a single supplementary damage sigil, and you can have at least 70% chance of proccing supplementary damage. Do this if you want to add another offensive or defensive sigil in this build if you prefer it that way. The next trait on the list is the good old level 15 Tyranny trait, which adds 36% attack to this build. This will help you reach the damage cap, so consider slotting Tyranny in your build. The next trait on the list is a level 15 quick cooldown trait, and having at least a level 15 quick cooldown is beneficial for any build out there, but of course having 3 is the goal. But since I do not have a good supplementary damage 5+ that have quick cooldowns, this is the best thing that I can do for this build. Of course, the faster you have access to your skills, the better the damage. Another essential trait you have is at least level 15 critical rate, which provides 30% additional critical hit chance. This will help us achieve the 100% critical chance if you already have a 20% critical chance in your overmastery. Second to the last trait is also the good old level 15 stamina trait, is still suggested for more damage. The 51% additional attack that this trait provides is recommended for this build. Moving on to the last one, and of course every build has a war elemental trait granting the build a superior element over any target and taking advantage of that 20% additional damage. Now that we've tackled the core traits for this build, it is time for the other trait suggestions. We have a little to no slot to work on here because of the alpha gamma combination, and the only traits that you can change here are the quick cooldown trait or removing the second supplementary damage sigil. If you are not comfortable with having 30k HP, you can change it with something like Aegis or slotting in a defensive trait like improved dodge or potion hoarder to increase your overall survivability. Usually if you have quick cooldown, you do have at least level 15 cascade as well. This will lessen your skill cooldown by 1.6% when you hit an enemy, and since Tweyen relies heavily on charge attacks, you can slot in a quick charge trait as well with cascade if you prefer it that way. Now that offensive setup is out of the way, let's move on to general setup. The selling point of this build is you can slot in a handful of defensive utilities, perfect for the general player base. I will just go over to the changes that I made here compared to the previous setup, and you can see all of the changes made on the screen right now. Pause the video if you need to, and feel free to adjust all of the defensive trait here according to your preference. The overall build is out of the way, let's now move on to damage test. In this section, I will be providing damage result samples for the latest Behemoth quest and Pieta fights for the offensive build. For the Pieta fights, we are seeing a 200k and 235k damage range per second and a total of 33 or 43m damage dealt in the course of 3 runs. And usually the battle lasts around 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. For the Behemoth quest, on the other hand, we are seeing 180 to 190k damage per second and dealing with a total of 57m to 62m damage. Of course, this could be higher as you master Tweyen in the long run, but for now, this is what I usually get. Note that these are not the best damage results out there, and I know a lot of people can do better and score way higher. For the general setup, I haven't included it in these results, but you will be dealing lesser damage compared to the offensive setup, but not a long mile. Overall, you can go wrong with either of these two builds, although we can say that I have noticed a discernible increase in my overall damage when using the offensive setup. It is more of a question if you are willing to sacrifice almost every defensive utility that you have. As I have mentioned, I did not expect that I would be having fun using Tweyen. Let me know in the comments what you think about their playstyle so far and all the things that you have learned from this video. However, if you are new to Relink and want to have the best start possible, click the videos here, and thank you for watching as always, and I will catch you on the next one.